Are the Watchtower and the Jehovah's Witnesses illegally or immorally inducting children? Now, I don't think we can say that they're doing it illegally, which I think it should be. Is it immoral? I think it's very much immoral. But let's have a little discussion about this thing. Let's have a little discussion. Let's just talk about it and see what everybody thinks. There he is. I know you may have seen this thumbnail that I put up here. That is Pennywise. Pennywise the dancing clown. Now, I remember when this movie or this TV show came out several years ago. I was young. I was pretty young. Still a JW at the time, of course. And the woman that I would later marry, we were just going together. And her cousin was my best friend. And he had a girlfriend. Her name was Aisha. And I couldn't wait for it to come on, because I was all about it. I was all about Pennywise the dancing clown. I couldn't wait to see what he was going to do to these kids. But she was so adamant as a Jehovah's Witness, saying, Keith, I remember her exact words. She was like, Keith, please don't watch that wicked TV show. And I said, okay, I won't watch it. They left about 5 minutes later, and I turned that shit right on immediately. I could not wait to see Pennywise the dancing clown. But there was a reason why I picked that, or I made that thumbnail. And as you can see, if you've had any history with the JWs, you know those pictures in the background are of the children that were basically sacrificed because they didn't take blood. But why did I pick that? Let me tell you why I picked Pennywise the dancing clown for this thumbnail. Let's talk about Pennywise for a second. Now, Pennywise was this entity, this evil entity, and he fed on children. And one of his main forms that he picked was of a clown. Why? Because clowns, some kids, most kids, love clowns, and they seem harmless and fun. Now, the parents who lived in the town where Pennywise resided was called Derry. And all the parents in the town of Derry were already under the influence of Pennywise the clown. But Pennywise knew that in order for him to sustain himself, he had to get to those kids. He fed off the kids. And he would instill fear in the kids. He wouldn't just eat them a lot of times. He would scare them. He would put this fear into them that made the kids taste better when he ate them finally. Now, ultimately, the kids grew up. And when they grew up, they all had special talents. And they realized that the special talents that all of them had were suppressed by the town that they were living in because of Pennywise control. But when they grew up, they realized that all those talents that they had were the very talents that would have kept Pennywise from devouring them. They all grew up and left the town, and they were awakened, and they all were able to use their abilities, their natural abilities, and they became wildly successful. But had they stayed in Derry, eventually they would have been taken over by Pennywise, and he would have held them up and made them stare into his eyes, and they would have been looking into what he called the deadlights that would have left them in a helpless, mindless state where, like Pennywise always said, everyone floats. They all float down here. And when they floated, they would be in this blissful state of ignorance. They didn't know what was going on around them. They were just floating in ignorance, which allowed Pennywise to use their very life force to sustain himself. Now, I'll talk about some points that the JWs use, and a lot of times they talk about the Bible. Now, I'm not a huge proponent of the Bible, but in order to rebut something that someone says and they're claiming that their argument is from that book, the best way to do that is to actually know what that book says. Now, since I'm not someone that is a huge proponent of the Bible, I do have my own beliefs about creation and a creator. Do I believe in a creator? Yes, of course, I believe in a creator. But I don't believe that creator is the creator that's mentioned in the Bible. I don't believe that a being that was able to create everything that we see that was not created from the earth itself, which man does, was created from the creator. Men can't even take nothing and create a blade of grass. As people, we don't even really understand the concept of nothing, because even here in our domain, what we would call or think of as nothingness has something in it. So we can't even grasp what nothingness really is. So I do believe in a creator, just not that creator is the person that is mentioned in the Bible. Now, going forward, what does that have to do with the discussion? Well, in this discussion about the Watchtower having children be baptized early, let's look at the example of the greatest person in this book. That person would be this dude. This is from jw.org too. This person is Jesus. Now, allegedly. Now, according to the Bible, Jesus was a very, very smart child. And everybody knew how intelligent and spiritual this little extraterrestrial was. Now, people might take offense to me saying that, but let's be realistic. If Jesus was real, he was an extraterrestrial. He was an alien. Because according to the Bible, the ultimate extraterrestrial, which would be God, beamed his extraterrestrial DNA into the womb of a woman, and this woman gave birth to the resulting baby. Now, we can, as people, concede that if you have, let's say, a black man If you have a drop of black blood in your blood, they're going to say you're black or mixed, but people will still be like, you're black. So if we can do that, then we also have to think that if you have a drop of alien in you, then you're an alien. So Jesus was basically an alien. He could manipulate water. He could clone fish. He could manipulate people's bodies, including his own body. All the characteristics that we basically attribute to aliens. Now, this alien was all about God, spirituality. Everybody around him was like, this kid is special. Well, I think according to the Bible again, at age 13, alien disappeared. Nobody knew where he went. And it's theorized that he may have went somewhere and learned some special stuff from monks. How to control matter and manipulate his mind, all that stuff, which kind of would have been unnecessary because he was already an alien. So he probably already had these special powers. But who knows? The point of all this is, according to the history and the Bible, Jesus himself was not baptized until he was about 30 years old. Again, according to the Bible, the greatest alien that we've ever seen wasn't baptized until he was 30 years old. Now, let's take a look at from jw.org's website what they say about baptism. Young ones, are you ready to get baptized? So let's jump in. Now, this portion of this article is from the Watchtower, March 16th, pages 6 through 11. I'm not going to read all of it. I'm just going to touch on some of this stuff. But the first paragraph says, this is an elder talking to a child. He says, I have known you since you were born. And he's talking to 12-year-old Christopher. 12 years old. And he said, I'm happy that you want to get baptized. But he asked him why he wants to take this step. Now, the Bible, the JWs talk about that it is up to the decision of whether or not this child is mature or not as to whether or not he or she should be baptized. It goes on to say in this paragraph, what does it mean to be mature? Maturity does not always refer to a person's age or physical growth. The Bible says that mature people have trained their powers of discernment to know the difference between right and wrong. A mature person knows what is right and has decided in his heart to do it. So he cannot easily be influenced to do what is wrong, and he does not always need someone else to tell him to do what is right. It is reasonable to expect that a young person who gets baptized will do what is right, even when his parents or adults are not around. Now, let's just look at that paragraph. They're saying it's reasonable to assume that someone would always do what is right. And we just saw that he was previously talking to a 12-year-old child. I think it's very unreasonable to assume that a 12-year-old will always do what is right, or that even will always know what is right in every circumstances. Now, of course, there will be some areas where the kid knows what's right and wrong, but there are gray areas where this kid, 12 years old, is not going to be able to discern what is the right thing for him to do going forward, he will always have some doubt. He may know some things for sure, but it's always easy to influence children. At some time, children are very easily influenced, especially by their peers. So let's keep going and see what else these people talk about. Now, they talk about dedication and baptism. And they talk about what the difference between dedication and baptism is. Now, I found these two paragraphs really interesting. This paragraph says, when you dedicate your life to Jehovah, you tell him that you belong to him. You promise that serving him will be the most important thing in your life. Such a promise to God is very serious. So how do you show that you know that you do not belong to yourself anymore, but that you now belong to Jehovah? Now that's a very interesting sentence. Very interesting sentence. Let's look at the very next paragraph that they mention. Now check this out. To illustrate, imagine that a friend gives you a car as a gift. He hands you the title and says, "The car is yours." But suppose your friend adds, "I will keep the keys and I will be the one who drives the car, not you." How would you feel about this gift? And how would you feel about the giver? Now, I find that to be very ironic, because in the previous paragraph they say, when you dedicate your life to Jehovah, you tell him that you now belong to him. Isn't that basically the same thing that they talked about in the paragraph after that, when they say a friend gives you a car but basically keeps the keys? So they're saying basically that God is saying, I've given you this gift of life, but your life is not yours. It belongs to me. So if your friend gave you a car and said, I'm gonna give you this car, but I'm gonna keep the keys, you would automatically think that that friend was a complete jerk. So if God does the same thing, why wouldn't God be a complete jerk? I find that very ironic and an oxymoron, so to speak, because I don't think anyone would give you a gift as great as life, but then turn around and say, but your life doesn't belong to you, it belongs to me. That is a very cruel and honestly jerked out thing for somebody to do, and I don't believe a creator would do something like that. And also, we talk about, they're talking about kids and their powers of discernment. But let's talk about how your brain works. Now this paragraph, this article here is from the University of Rochester Medical Center. And it's talking about the way that the teenage brain, or that the brain itself, is developed. It says the rational part of a teen's brain isn't fully developed and won't be until age 25 or so. 25. And the previous paragraph we read mentioned a child age 12 being baptized. Now, the article goes on to say, adults think with the prefrontal cortex, the brain's rational part. This is the part of the brain that responds to situations with good judgment and an awareness of long-term consequences. Teens process information with the amygdala. This is the emotional part. In teens' brains, the connection between the emotional part of the brain and the decision-making center are still developing, and not necessarily at the same rate. That's why teens experience overwhelming emotional input. They can't explain later what they were thinking. They weren't thinking as much as they were feeling. Now that is very interesting, because we all know, if you're an XJW, how it feels when some of your friends are baptized, when the elders give speeches over the platform talking about how you need to get baptized, or articles like this one where they talk about 12-year-old Christopher who got baptized, and then they give all these illustrations of young people who are getting baptized very young. They do it either in the magazines from the platform or in all these conventions where they have all these perfect situations that happen. And it's really a form of peer pressure. So the difference is that teens, as the paragraph we just read mentioned, they're not able to think long term about their decisions. And it reminds me basically, like, I've had 4 cars, and the one that I have now is the nicest car I've ever had. It's the only car I've ever had to finance. Every other car I've paid with cash. But when I bought that car, the salesman didn't run down a list of all the things, all the negative things that would happen if I were not to pay for that car. It's not like he sat down and said, hey, if you don't pay for this car, we might repo it, your credit might get ruined, you might have to file bankruptcy. He didn't run down a list of all the negatives that go along with having this car. He just talked about all the positive things about the car. Okay, this got double two-tone leather seats, heated and vented seats, turbocharged engine, all the navigation, all the good things about the car, And as a young person in the organization, it's not as if the elders who are going over these baptismal questions with you run down a list of all the negative things that could happen in the long term, because they know that that would be something that would dissuade you from making that decision, especially if you're a young person. They don't even do that with adults, much less a 12-year-old or any teenager, because that would be a red flag if they were to sit down and say, okay, you can get baptized, but if you ever gain any information in the future that would cause you to no longer be a Jehovah's Witness, you are going to be shunned. You will lose your entire family who are Jehovah's Witnesses, all of your friends that you've known your whole life who are Jehovah's Witnesses, and you will feel a guilt that will be with you for the rest of your life. They will tell you, you will feel like every bad thing that happens to you is your fault because you left the organization. If they were to tell you that all the decisions that you make will be based on all the things that you've learned growing up, and you will feel really bad about how your life is now because you've left the organization. If they would tell you, you may need counseling after you leave this organization because your mind is going to be so different than how it is right now. If someone were to tell you that, that would be a huge factor in whether or not you would become a Jehovah's Witness. But they don't do that. They don't tell these teenagers all the negative consequences that could come along in the long term with their choices. Car dealerships, the salesmen don't tell you the negative things about what could happen with you buying a car, because as an adult, they expect you to already know that stuff. You should already know what's going to happen if you don't pay this car note. There are going to be a ton of negative consequences that you should already know. You're expected to know that. They don't tell you. Teenagers, children, on the other hand, do not have the capability to think long term. They're going to be so happy that everybody around them is going to be like, oh, congratulations, young brother, you got baptized. Jehovah's going to be so happy. Jehovah, you're making Jehovah smile right now. Jehovah's just up there smiling at you. He's so happy. He's so happy. And everybody's giving him all these hugs and love bombs. And he thinks this is going to be like this forever. It very well may be for that particular person. But we know for millions of other people, it's not that way. Millions of other people are children who are baptized, and we all know that the person that you are at 12 is not the person you are at 18 or 20 or 25 or 30. Even between ages 12 and 18, you will change so much and you will learn so much that you will not be the same person. So is it really moral for these people to induct children into an organization that literally has the power to take away their entire family and support system? That is the issue. Also, look at this. The main change, and this is from that same article, the main change is that unused connections in the thinking and processing part of your child's brain, called the gray matter, are pruned away. At the same time, other connections are strengthened. This is the brain's way of becoming more efficient based on the use it or lose it principle. The pruning process begins in the back of the brain. The front part of the brain, as mentioned before, the prefrontal cortex, is remodeled last. The prefrontal cortex is the decision-making part of the brain responsible for your child's ability to plan and think about the consequences of actions, solve problems, and control impulses. Changes in this part continue into early adulthood. So science has proven that children don't have the ability to make these long-term decisions. This is not something that should be done for children. Now, the difference between the JWs and other organizations, yeah, I know other religions baptize babies, they baptize people really young like that. But the difference is a lot of those other religions, excluding the ones that practice this same thing as the JWs, will not cause you to lose your entire family structure just because you have changed your way of thinking or because you've learned some new information, like the people in your organization are molesting children and they're not turning them over to the police, and you have a real moral problem with that. So you think, hey, I don't want to be in this thing anymore. So simply because I'm standing up for the law, I now have to lose my family. Or you take a psychology class in college and you learn, or a history class in college, either or, and you learn that a lot of the things that you've been told your entire life are flat out not true. And so you say, well, I don't want to be a part of this organization because I've learned that things that they are saying are simply untrue, and I can prove it. So now I have to lose my entire family. That is a ridiculous thing to try to think that a 12-year-old or any child has the mental comprehension to think about and make a decision on at 12 years old. There are adults who can't process information like that. Hell, I didn't become mature till yesterday. That's damn near. I didn't become mature till much later in life. And the funny thing, the really ironic thing, is that I tried to get baptized. Now, I've told you all about how I tried to get baptized once, and the elders came in and busted it up because I was dating somebody, and her father didn't like me. Well, I tried to get baptized once before that. I was about 12 or 13 this time. And I started going over the questions, and then we just stopped. And I had no idea why. We just stopped going over the questions. Now, as I've told you guys before, my father is a Jehovah's Witness. But back then, my father was not a Jehovah's Witness. My father was a weed smoking, porn watching, regular dude. He was just a regular man. And what I found out later was that my father stepped in and said, I don't want him getting baptized because he's too young. I didn't know that until I got much older. I always wondered what happened. But it's really ironic that now, my father's Jehovah's Witness, we don't speak. But as much as I have a bad taste in my mouth about him now, I can say that was a good decision on his part. I can't fault him for that decision, because I was too young to make that decision. I didn't know the repercussions of what would have happened with that. Even though they happened anyway, I still suffered the same consequences. I still lost everything, even though I was never baptized. I still lost my entire family. But as an adult outside of the organization, he was able to say, he is too young to make this decision. I don't want him getting baptized because he's too young. Now, that shows how the thinking of somebody that's outside the organization differs or can differ from the thinking of the people inside the organization. Had he not done that, I would have gotten baptized at 12, like Christopher in this story. And I definitely would have gotten this fellowship. I already know that. There's just no doubt in my mind about that. I definitely would have gotten this fellowship, because right after the elders came in and busted up that baptismal questions meeting, I wouldn't have sex with my girlfriend like the next couple of days after that. That shit happened immediately. I was like, well, no, fuck this shit. I'm getting So I don't want to rant too long today, but let's just look at one other thing. He says here, have you noticed that sometimes your child's thinking and behavior seems quite mature, but at other times your child seems to behave or think in illogical, impulsive, or emotional ways? And again, it talks about the back and front development of the brain. Now, we know kids can be mature one day, and the next day they will be children. You can't expect children to always be mature. That's just not going to happen. That's not the way a child's mind works. They're going to be mature at one point, and then one day they're going to be like little children. They're going to be flopping around doing dumb stuff. You're going to have to smack them in the back of the head. That's just the way childhood works. These children are not, a lot of them are not able to be adults. They don't have the ability to do that. Now, At the end of this article, it talks about it talks about young Christopher. And again, the magazine is the March 16th study edition, 2018, pages 6 through 11. I'll leave a link to it in the description for those who are catching it after I finish streaming. But what happens to Christopher? Well, Christopher keeps serving and serving and serving. Christopher becomes an adult. And where is Christopher now? Take a wild guess where Christopher is now. Christopher is at Bethel. And we all know what goes down at Bethel. Hell, for all we know, Christopher may be one of the people that got caught jacking off in front of some other dude. Christopher might have been one of these dudes that got caught at the strip club with the pornea leg. Hell, Christopher might have been one of the dudes running around in masturbation pants, for all we know. So that is what happened to Christopher. Now, I know personally of several JWs who got baptized really young. Almost all of them got disfellowshipped. I literally can't think of any of my friends who were young and got baptized in the congregation that I went to. And when I say young, I mean like early teens that got baptized and weren't disfellowshipped at some point. That I didn't have to act like they weren't there when they came to the Kingdom Hall. So it happens a whole lot more than the Watchtower would like to admit. The point is, and why I even did this stream, was that if you know, or if you are studying, because a lot of people who comment on my videos and send me messages are people who are studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, who have children. There are people who are in the organization right now who may be thinking about leaving the organization that have children. And if you are any of those things, I would ask you to really, really consider not allowing your children to become baptized in that organization until they become adults, until they have the ability to actually think about what they are doing without being in a state of peer pressure, for one, from their friends, or being in a state where they are easily influenced by the elders of the congregation. Because we know if adults are influenced enough to become Jehovah's Witnesses, it's going to be very easy for children to be influenced to become Jehovah's Witnesses. Really, really, really think about what you are asking that child to take on mentally. You are asking that child to make a decision that will affect the rest of his life, his or her life, and could possibly result in that child literally losing everything that he or she knows and loves. We all know of all the examples of people who are depressed, committing suicide, all because they were baptized, made a decision to change their life, do something different, and are now suffering the consequences of simply growing up and using the maturity and discernment that the Watchtower says you should have as a mature person. So I think I'll wrap this up right here. Let me just say hello to everyone who is in the chat. Self-Care Boss asks, now, are there additional duties for a JW who has been baptized? Is it easier to leave the organization if you have not been baptized? That's a good question. As far as I remember, before you get baptized, before I got baptized, you had to have at least 10 hours of service. Now, I don't remember there being a set time that you had to have as a baptized Jehovah's Witness. You did have to go out in service. And you did have to go out in service. I think the major difference between a baptized person and an unbaptized person is that a baptized person will be read off from the podium, and read off means, they have these little announcements between the meetings. Back then it was Thursday. There was a Thursday night meeting, the service meeting. They would have the first part, and then they would have the service meeting where they would discuss how to go out and field service and teach people how to indoctrinate people. In between that time, there were the announcements. Now, when the announcements happened, if anybody was disfellowship, that's when you would find out. Or sometimes they did it, I guess maybe if they disfellowship somebody on a Friday, they were like, well, we're gonna have to hurry up and embarrass this person right now and let everybody know that, immediately start ignoring this person. Because that's basically what happened. Like, if they read your name and said Keith Fitzpatrick has been disfellowshipped, and they would just walk back off. That's basically how it would happen. At some brother whoever, I just remember Brother Harris doing it all the time. Brother Harris would walk up to the podium, get in front of the mic. Keith Fitzpatrick has been disfellowshipped, and walk back off. Now, that never happened to me because I was never baptized, but that's how it would go. Immediately, anybody who may have said hello to you and hugged you and been loving to you right when the meeting started would immediately ignore you right after Brother Harris walked off the platform. So I think that is one of the main differences. Now, if you are baptized and you stop going out in field service and you stop coming into the meetings, you will become what they call inactive. And after a certain amount of time, they may read you off and just say you have become inactive, which would probably lead to a bunch of elders coming to your door, a bunch of people trying to witness to you to get you to come back, because you're not necessarily disfellowshipped at that point. They're just basically saying, hey, this person is not slanging magazines and books anymore. So yeah, this is your call to action. Go and holler at this person and see if we can get them to come back, because every little person counts. So yeah, I think that is the main difference between a non-baptized and baptized person. So yeah, guys, that is pretty much everything I have for this show. I appreciate everybody coming through and watching. Johnny B says, Kay, that is a creepy ass picture. Yeah, I know it is. But you know what? That picture really is how I feel about the organization. When I made it, it literally gave me the creeps. It literally gave me the creeps. Right after I finished it, I just kind of looked at it and I felt really scared, not just because of Pennywise the clown, but everything that picture represents. Like when I put the watchtower on his head, it was really bold. But then I thought, you know what? That's not how it is. So I faded it so it's just like there, but you can barely see it, because that is how it is. Pennywise is like the governing body, and they present themselves as someone who is friendly and loves you. And we're going to have fun. We're going to have fun, your friends. Come on, friends. We're going to have a great time talking to people. Come on, friends. Come on, friends. You want a balloon? Want a balloon? Come on, Georgie. But somewhere in that mind, where that's like in the picture, how that watchtower is back there, that evil, that beast is in there, and you can't see it unless you really, really look closely. And by them going out and so vehemently telling people, make sure your children get baptized. Make sure you're working toward getting your children baptized. Give me your children. Give us your children. Because too many of you people are walking away. Too many of you guys are getting old and dying. Too many of you are on the internet. You're finding out too much shit. Give us your children. Give us your children. They don't say it in those words, but they are saying, give us your children. And me saying this right now, I literally have goosebumps, because that's how it is. Give us your children. We want to have them so indoctrinated that they will kill themselves for us. They will give their lives to sustain us, the same way Pennywise, the it, will go after children just so the organization, can continue to stay alive and function. So guys, yeah, thank you, Apostate's Finest. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll go ahead and wrap up here. Get this Thursday, that is the 20th, I'm going to be doing a live stream with Free Monique. This should be a really, really good one. I left a link to the show already, so if you want to go ahead and set a reminder for yourself so it'll pop up. It's going to be this Thursday, September 20th at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. And please come in. We're going to set the show up so that people can call in and ask her questions. And this is taking me, I've been working on this all day just to get my system able to do this, because I've never had a live hangout where I'm doing a hangout with somebody and somebody was calling in. So it's going to take a lot of finagling with my computer to get that to work. So I'm sure I'll get it, though. I'm not worried about it. It might, I am a little worried about it. Let me stop bullshitting. It's gonna be a lot. So hopefully that will work. Please come out. And then next week, hopefully if he gets back to me, I'm gonna have a show with a guy named Michael. He is a singer, and he was in a cult while he was young that literally almost killed him. So his story is a really heart-wrenching story, and he went through a lot. So I really hope that he can get with me next week so we can bring that show to you guys. He has a very inspirational, very, very inspirational story. So that will hopefully be next week, and of course I'll set a reminder for that. Guys, also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit the bell, because a lot of people have caught the show afterwards and said, hey, I didn't know the show happened. So if you don't click the bell, you won't get a notification that the show is coming on. So please click the bell so that you can see when it's coming on. So again, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you all so much for your support, and I will see you all on the next one. All right. Peace.